This is part 6 of the Craftsman Emerson Gen 2 Drill Press Rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 5, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we will be doing the citric acid bath for most of the metal parts, and then we will be cleaning some parts with the wire wheels. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So for the citric acid bath, we are going to be mixing up this citric acid powder form. You can get a bag like this off of Amazon for about 30 or 40 bucks. This is a 10-pound bag, and they sell it as small as 1-pound increments. And I usually use about a tablespoon scoop, 1 per gallon of water. So in this bin, I'm probably going to put in there 20 or so gallons. And I'm just going to put all of the metal parts in there except for anything that has graphics on it, again, just like with the simple green. And we're not going to put any of the Zamic parts in there. So the Zamic parts are going to be your pulleys. Anything that looks like it's aluminum, it's probably Zamic. And any of the stuff that was chrome plated, like the feed stop collar. And my dog making a little cameo there. So after about 24 hours, we'll pull those parts out, rinse them off, and then we're going to lay them out on these towels. So everything that's going on the left-hand towel, that dirty towel, is going to get dried off, and then it's probably going to get coated with WD-40. And that's just to keep it from developing a surface rust until we can get to the wire wheeling of those parts. Everything that goes on the towel on the right-hand side, that clean towel, is parts that are going to get painted. So we'll dry all of the parts off, and then we're going to separate them from what's going to get painted and what's not going to get painted. And for this, most of the drying is just going to be towel drying. You can use some compressed air. I would not recommend using a heat gun because that will just cause the surface rust to reappear. But this is just one more step, and the whole purpose of that citric acid was to remove the rust. So there may be a little bit of rust left on some of these parts, but the wire will usually take care of that after the fact. So you should notice that most of these parts are much cleaner than they were when we first disassembled the drill press, and the paint on a lot of these parts did not come off with the paint stripper that I used, and that's pretty normal. That stuff, I don't know why, but the gray paint that Craftsman used, or in this case Emerson, it is just really resilient. On the cast iron especially, like the base, it didn't touch that paint really. The head casting, it came off pretty good. So we're going to go back over those parts that we tried to strip the paint off with a wire wheel in this video and clean them up further. Also, keep in mind that if you are going to spray any of these parts with WD-40, you want to make sure you don't get any overspray onto the parts that are going to get painted. If you do get WD-40 on a part that you're going to paint, then you're going to need to soak that in simple green again to remove that WD-40, or wipe it down with some mineral spirits or something like that. But and the WD-40 is not, a long-term protectant. WD-40 actually has water in it, so stuff will rust with WD-40. I'm just using it to kind of be a stopgap on these parts until we can get to the wire wheel. So here we are with the base, and this is a wire wheel on my angle grinder, and we're still not going to be able to get most of this paint off of here. But what we are going to do is we're going to rough up that surface. So when we paint over this, when we apply the primer first and then the paint, the primer will adhere to it, and then the paint will adhere to that primer. And this is also going to be the case when we do the table, the bottom of the table as well. And you'll see me flip this base over and do a little bit of the wire wheeling on the underside, but I'm not terribly concerned about the underside. You know, nobody's going to see it. Who really cares? So, you know. Also, while we're here, we may as well go ahead and clean up some of these bores with wire wheels. So you'll see me use a variety of bore brushes, bottle brushes, to clean up some of the bores. And this is the head casting. And it's kind of tricky because the bottom is not like perfectly flat. It's got kind of a raised bevel down through the center of it. And the back is not flat either. So figuring out how to position this thing so that you can hit it with the wire wheel gets a little wacky. And if you're not used to working with stuff like this, then, you know, clamp this down. You know, set it on the edge of the table and stick a quick grip clamp in there and just clamp it to the table. That way it's not going to go shooting away from you or anything like that. So we'll do most of the big work with the angle grinder, and then we'll come back with the drill with various wire brushes on it to get into some of those nooks and crannies as well as all the bores. And I think the head cleaned up really nice. Now getting down on the inside of it, this is a lot different than working on a 100 or a 150. You're having to access the inside of it through these cutouts on it that are not very big. So if you can't get everything cleaned up on the inside, it's not the end of the world. Just remove what you can and then, you know, roll with it. All right, so here we are with the table. We'll clean out those bores first. And if you recall, we've already sanded the top of the table. And we'll come back and do one final sanding after we've painted everything before we go to assembly. But right now, we're just hitting the bulk of it with the wire wheel, either on the angle grinder or on the drill. All right, now this one, this is what I spent a lot of time on. This is the belt cover, obviously. And I've got it clamped to the table just out of camera at the bottom of the screen there. And I can get a lot of it with that wire wheel, but those sharp corners and stuff I can't really get to. I tried using some of these other wire wheels and that really wasn't working. So I ended up going to a sander. But before I did that, I wanted to fix some of the bends or dents on this thing. So you've got one right there on that rail. I'm just using a pair of pliers to straighten it out. And then I've got one that's kind of down near the bottom off camera right now that we'll attack in a little bit. So this is the sander that I ended up using. I don't even remember what these things are called. I think it's a multi-tool or something like that. But it's got these triangular sanding discs on them. And then I'm just hitting it with a sanding sponge after that. And here's where I'm detecting that little bend on the lip on the front end of this thing. You can kind of see it there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stack up some boards and then just try to beat it into submission. It's real small. Probably wouldn't even notice it, but I kind of felt my glove snag on it, and that's why I was like, all right, let's fix that while we're here. All right, so reclamping that sucker down. And it's still sticking up a little bit. There we go. Good enough for government work. So now we'll finish out the inside of the belt cover. And obviously, you know, on a Gen 3 or a Gen 4 and on the commercial models, the belt covers are made out of plastic, so you don't really have to do that much work to them. But these Gen 2s had this sheet metal belt cover. And it's kind of one of the cool things about the Gen 2, so I want to get it as cleaned up as I can. And then after we finished the inside, I basically came up with this combination of 2x4s with some 1/4-inch thick oak wedged between them to kind of fill that gap of the inside of the belt cover, and that gave it enough rigidity that I could attack it with the wire wheel without deforming it in any of the areas. All right, so that finished out the belt cover. And here we have the hinge assembly. And we're just going to wire wheel this on the grinder wire wheel and clean it up as best as possible. There's a lot of small areas that I can't get to really well. And I've decided this time around I am going to go ahead and media blast a couple of different parts. So I'll media blast the inside of that. Just like I'm going to media blast the inside of this capacitor cover as well. Now, I don't have a camera really set up for media blast, and my media blast booth is nothing to really write home about, so you won't have any footage of me actually media blasting it. Just know that I did and cleaned up this stuff, and I'll show you what it looks like after the media blast. I also, the two end bells for the motor, one of them I cleaned up with the wire wheel, and one of them I media blasted just to see the difference between the two. And this is the terminal cover that I'm wire wheeling now. I don't think it's going to make any difference whether something was media blasted or wire wheeled when we paint, because the primer is going to create a layer that's going to kind of smooth everything out anyways. If we were using a thinner paint, it would certainly be an issue. So these are the column collars. There's 4 of these pieces. And I'm just going to show you a couple of them, and then we'll move on. Not rocket science here. And here we are with the, well, they call it the cover plate, but it's basically what the belt cover rests on. And I was able to clean it up pretty good on the top side and on the sides of it. But that underside, the wire wheel kept grabbing it, and I was afraid I was going to get it ripped out of my hands, so I didn't mess with the underside of it too much. I am trying to get at it, but I also don't want to get sucked into that wire wheel. So, good enough. And then this is the motor mount. We wire wheel it. And it cleaned up really good. So no problem there. Didn't have a whole lot of paint left on it anyways. But there weren't too many tricky areas for it in getting access to it with that grinder wire wheel. Okay, so this is a little out of order, but this is stuff that was media blasted before we wire wheeled it. And so on the left, you've got the media blasted end frame, and then on the right, you've got the end frame that was wire wheeled. And you kind of just saw a quick look at that capacitor cover on the inside where it was media blasted. So now we're at the stator, and we're going to clean it up. And for that, I'm using this CRC electrical contact cleaner. Comes out with a pretty good amount of force, so it knocks a lot of the dirt out of there. And then you can come back and hit it with a toothbrush and clean it up a little better. But big thing here is just to make sure you're not damaging those windings. And if the lead wires for the stator are brittle, then you're obviously going to want to be careful around them not to break them or bend them too much. Okay, so now we're just masking the stator. And basically it's just everything that's on the inside of the stator we want to mask and minimize the amount of paint that gets on it. And everything on the outside of the stator will get painted. So sometimes I'll wire wheel the outside of that stator and get all of that old paint off of it. This time I'm just going to rough that paint up with a wire brush. And we'll do all of that after we get the masking done. So since all that wiring for the terminal bar and the thermal overload protection switch are all soldered together, I'm not going to desolder them, because I don't need to replace any of that wiring. So we're just going to tuck it inside the stator and mask it off as well. Then we're just going to rough up the exterior of the stator with the wire brush. And we're going to remove that decal that's on there. So I just applied a little bit of heat. I don't want to deform it. I'm going to try to save that decal. So we'll see. I have no idea how I'm going to reapply it, but yeah. We'll use a little WD-40 to get the rest of that residue off of there. And then we'll clean up all of the stator with some rubbing alcohol to get rid of that WD-40. And that is going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. Feel free to ask some questions or leave a comment in the comment section below. In the next video, we will continue masking and prepping for paint, and then we're going to get to painting. So as always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you next time.